1,500 years ago, a philosopher hailing from the Roman Empire authored a remarkable theological pamphlet. Its aim was to act as a 4th century catechism for Hellenic paganism, providing a guide for believers and a source of theological defense against the rising influence of Christianity. His name was Saturninus Secundus Sallustius, or, as he came to be known, simply as Sallustius. Motivated by a desire to counter the attacks of Christian propaganda aimed at destroying the Hellenic religion, he set out to create a work that would meet theology with theology. In this lesson, we will delve into the purpose and significance of this extraordinary work, exploring the historical context and impact it had on the religious landscape of its time.
Welcome to the Julian Academy. My name is Manny Plazos, and I will be your preceptor through this course on theology. Most people arrive at religious study believing that comprehension is the goal, that somehow if the gods can be explained clearly enough, ordered neatly enough, that somehow they'll become manageable. But this assumption is not only mistaken, it's precisely the error that this course is meant to correct. So if that statement makes you a little uncomfortable, uncertain, or you feel some resistance to it, know that that's not an obstacle to the work that's set before us. It's the first sign that the work has begun. Now, the work that we're going to study in this theology course was written by a man named Sallustius, and the name of his work is On the Gods and the Cosmos. And Sallustius opens this work exactly where we are now, not with explanation, but with correction. He doesn't ask, what are the gods like? He doesn't ask, what do the gods desire? He doesn't even ask, how do we approach the gods? Instead, he asks, what kind of thinking makes those questions possible at all? What kind of thinking or things make those questions impossible? So this course doesn't begin with theology. It begins with orientation. Not with belief, but with posture. Not with answers, but with the discipline required to receive those answers without distortion. Only when the impulse to understand has been properly restrained can genuine religious knowledge begin to take form, if such knowledge is granted at all. To understand the work before us, we have to first understand the man who wrote it. Sallustius, whose proper name was Saturninus Secundus Sallustius, was not a poet, wasn't a mystic, he wasn't even a speculative academic philosopher. He was a Neoplatonic thinker, a high-ranking imperial officer, and a trusted companion of the Roman Emperor Julian. And he was active during the brief and decisive years of Julian's reign. Sallustius held real administrative power. He was so deeply trusted that Julian is said to have offered him the office of Praetorian Prefect, an offer Sallustius declined, citing philosophical duties. So this tells us something essential about the man. Sallustius wasn't writing from the safety of abstraction. He was a philosophically trained statesman, writing under pressure, in a context where ideas had immediate institutional, political, and cultural stakes. And he was writing at a historical moment when the religious order of the empire stood at the brink. And now, to understand why he wrote On the Gods and the Cosmos, we have to first understand the man whose unfinished vision shaped it, the namesake of our academy, the Emperor Julian himself. Flavius Claudius Julianus, later called the Apostate by Christian chroniclers, was born in 331 current era into the dynasty of the Emperor Constantine I, at a moment when the Roman Empire was undergoing rapid religious transformation. After the conversion of Constantine to Christianity, the Christian religion moved from a persecuted sect to an imperial beneficiary. Julian's childhood was shaped by this transition and by violence. So when Constantine I died in 337, the throne passed to Julian's cousin Constantius II, who, in order to consolidate power, led a massacre of most of Julian's close relatives. Constantius II ordered the murders of many descendants from the second marriage of his father, leaving only Constantius and his brothers Constantine II and Constans I, and their cousins Julian and Gallus, Julian's half-brother, as the surviving male relatives related to the Emperor Constantine. So at the time of the massacre, Julian was 6 years old and Gallus was around 11 years old. And it's commonly believed that the only reason that they were spared was because they were so young. So with most of the male relatives killed in these hereditary purges, Julian and Gallus were excluded from public life. And they were strictly guarded in their youth, given a Christian education, and groomed for loyalty instead of leadership. So Julian, by this, received a very fantastic classical education. He studied Homer, he studied rhetoric, he studied philosophy, and crucially, he entered Neoplatonism. And through teachers influenced by Iamblichian theurgy, Julian came to see the old Hellenic gods not as obsolete civic symbols, but as intelligent principles structuring the cosmos. Pagan religion to him wasn't nostalgia. It was metaphysics enacted through ritual. So in his early 20s, Julian quietly abandoned Christianity, not out of rebellion, but out of conviction. He concluded that Christianity's exclusive claims, historical literalism, and moralized theology distorted the nature of the divine and destabilized cosmic order. And by contrast, Hellenistic religion, properly understood, preserved plurality, hierarchy, and transcendence. And so something I want to introduce at this particular moment is something that maybe a lot of people don't understand. There are two terms that are used to incorporate the theological scope of what we are. One is Hellenic and the other is Hellenistic, right? And there's a profound difference between these two words. Hellenic usually references, especially in modern times, people who are ethnically Greek, the Hellenes, right? So Hellenic kind of incorporates that you are culturally and ethnically Greek. The Hellenistic period, Hellenistic is a word that means sort of like the Greeks, kind of like the Greeks. So it is more eclectic and it is more encompassing elements. The Hellenistic period was influenced a lot by the Egyptian religion, as well as the Greek religion, as well as even Judaism and other religions that were around in the time period. So when we say the Hellenistic period, we are referring to not specifically ancient Greek religion, but a period after, during the Roman Empire and even before the Roman Empire, where people took what the Greeks had done, what the native Greeks had done, and kind of blended it with other cultures and other ideas and other philosophies. So the Hellenistic religion means the religion that is based primarily in the ancient Greek religion, but does not exclude itself from other input. All right, so I wanted to explain that first. So back to Julian. Through a series of events and adventures, Julian eventually ascended to the imperial throne in 361 CE. And he inherited an empire that had already been transformed by half a century of Christian patronage. Under the rule of Constantine and his successors, Christianity had become an institution of the state that was financially supported by the state, legally privileged, and culturally authoritative. So its clergy enjoyed exemptions, its councils shaped imperial policy, and its doctrine, however contested internally, was enforced by law. His uncle Constantine I had confiscated all funding from the pagan temples that supported the large festivals and sacrifices and funneled it into new Christian churches and those religious celebrations. So it had been about 50 years since anybody had even experienced a really big pagan festival or pagan event, right? Christianity became the dominant religion. So Julian, when he ascended the throne, didn't attempt to undo this transformation through force like other emperors had done. He was very adamant about not specifically persecuting the Christians, because he saw that in the past that simply added to their devotion, right? It drew them closer. So he didn't outlaw Christianity, and he didn't return to the persecutions of the earlier centuries. Instead, his approach was deliberate and structural. His first major act was the issuance of an edict of religious toleration. All cults, all religious organizations were declared legally permissible. Even Christian bishops who had been exiled through their own internal conflicts were recalled to their stations, and imperial enforcement of Christian orthodoxy was withdrawn. So it was no longer the law of the land to believe what the Christian orthodoxy said. And so a lot of people, when they look back at what Julian did, misunderstand this act as sort of a generosity towards Christians, but it really wasn't generosity. It was in fact diagnostic. Julian recognized that Christian unity depended upon state intervention. By removing that intervention, he allowed doctrinal divisions to reemerge without imperial arbitration. So Christianity wasn't suppressed, it was decentered. So at the same time, Julian ended Christianity's exclusive claim upon imperial resources. Christian clergy were no longer treated as privileged legal class. Public funds were no longer directed primarily towards churches. Pagan temples, many of which had been closed, defunded, or neglected, were reopened, repaired, and restored to legal recognition. Their lands were returned, their priesthoods were once again acknowledged as public religious offices. That wasn't retaliation, it was equalization. Julian understood that religion could not survive as a private sentiment while competing with an organized institution. If the gods were to remain present within the life of the empire, their cults had to be restored as legitimate civic realities. Festivals resumed, sacrifices were once again public acts, and the old forms returned, not as nostalgia, but as visible signs that the empire no longer recognized a single religious narrative as normal. Yet, Julian knew that ritual alone would not suffice. He believed that pagan religion had failed not because it lacked beauty or antiquity, but because it had surrendered its intellectual coherence. Too many priests performed rites without understanding them. Too many educated citizens either dismissed myth as childish or accepted it literally, unable to explain how divine stories could coexist with philosophical reason. And so for this reason, Julian undertook the reform of pagan priesthoods themselves. Priests were expected to live disciplined lives, to study philosophy, and to understand the theological meaning of the rites they performed. Religion was no longer to be a matter of inherited custom alone, but of formed understanding. Paganism, if it was to survive, had to be understandable, intelligible. This commitment to intelligibility extended to education. In 362 CE, Julian issued what later writers would call the school law. It didn't close Christian schools, nor did it ban Christian teaching. Instead, it declared that those who taught the classical authors, Homer, Hesiod, Plato, must do so in good faith. One could not explain texts founded upon the gods while publicly denying those gods' existence or legitimacy. So Julian's reason was straightforward. Education is not neutral. Classical literature presupposed a theological worldview. To teach it while rejecting that worldview was, in his judgment, an act of bad faith. So this law didn't imprison Christians, but it did exclude them from the cultural and administrative formation of the empire. It was a pressure placed upon the structures, not the bodies. So throughout these reforms, Julian carefully avoided violence. He refused to create martyrs. He understood that persecution would only strengthen the religion he opposed. His strategy was instead to withdraw the privileges that had made Christianity dominant and to rebuild the institutions that had allowed traditional religion to function as a living system. This is the context in which Sallustius enters the historical record. Sallustius was both a Neoplatonic philosopher and a senior imperial official, one of Julian's closest confidants. Unlike many court intellectuals, Sallustius combined philosophical training with administrative authority. When Julian sought a way to stabilize pagan religion intellectually, Sallustius was uniquely positioned to respond. His treatise on the gods and the cosmos was the result. The work is not an attack on Christianity. It doesn't even mention the name Christianity. It does not argue or persuade. Instead, it defines. In a series of concise propositions, Sallustius lays out a minimal but rigorous theology. The gods are good, the gods are impassive, the gods are incorporeal, they are ungenerated, non-local. The myths are divine modes of concealment, and ritual aligns rather than influences. The cosmos is ordered, not sentimental, and the text functions as theological infrastructure, a pagan catechism of intelligibility rather than belief, a way to understand the gods, ourselves, and the world in a unified way, a way that makes sense and a way that can be understood. There is no surviving edict proving that Julian formally commissioned this text, but the alignment is exact. The treatise appears during Julian's reign, addresses precisely the problems Julian identified, and adopts a form suited for instruction, memorization, and standardization. In Roman political reality, this places the work squarely within Julian's reform program, whether or not a parchment ever bore the word commission. Julian's death in 363 CE during his Persian campaign ended the experiment. His successors restored Christian privilege, and the institutional reforms he envisioned never had time to mature. Politically, the project failed. Intellectually, it didn't. On the Gods and the Cosmos survived because it did not depend on imperial power. It articulated a theology capable of standing on its own, calm, austere, and structurally complete. Where Julian's empire collapsed, Sallustius's framework endured. Julian is remembered as the last pagan emperor. Sallustius should be remembered as something quieter and more enduring, the architect of a final, lucid attempt to give Hellenistic religion the theological clarity it needed to survive. Together they represent an interrupted project, one that sought to ground religion not in coercion or sentiment, but in cosmic order and disciplined understanding. The Julian Academy adopts On the Gods and the Cosmos by Sallustius as its core theological text because it provides what most modern religious systems lack: a disciplined, non-polemical, structurally coherent account of divinity capable of sustaining plural practice without collapsing into contradiction or sentimentality. This choice is neither antiquarian nor devotional. It is institutional. Sallustius does not ask the reader to believe. He asks the reader to understand. His propositions establish the minimal conditions under which theology remains understandable. For the Academy, this distinction is decisive. A religious institution cannot be founded on interior states such as sincerity, inspiration, or personal experience, because such states are unstable. Institutions endure only when grounded in shared understanding. Sallustius offers precisely that: a theological grammar that can be taught, examined, corrected, and preserved across generations. This is why On the Gods and the Cosmos functions within the Academy as our foundational theology, rather than as commentary, mythography, or devotional reading. It establishes the conditions under which all subsequent study, ritual, ethics, psychology, cosmology, and leadership can proceed without incoherence. The Academy's use of Sallustius is also an explicit continuation of the project begun prematurely ended by Julian the Apostate. Julian's aim was not uniform worship, but uniform fluency or philosophical understanding. Within that vision, Sallustius' text operates as the missing keystone, a concise, non-sectarian theological framework capable of unifying diverse cults without erasing them. In the Julian Academy, we do not reenact Julian's reforms. We translate their logic into educational form. Where Julian attempted to reform priesthoods by law, the Academy forms leaders through curriculum. Where he sought doctrinal clarity to stabilize religion, the Academy provides theological literacy as a prerequisite for ritual authority and sacred leadership. Sallustius remains central because his work resists every failure mode that undermines religion in modernity. Emotionalism, literalism, fragmentation, and the collapse of theology into personal belief. Sallustius offers a vision of the divine that requires neither enforcement nor apology, only disciplined understanding. The Julian Academy therefore treats on the gods and the cosmos, not as a relic of a lost world, but as unfinished infrastructure. It is the theological foundation upon which a non-coercive, plural, intelligible religious institution can be built, one capable of enduring precisely because it is ordered, restrained, and clear. What Julian attempted through empire, the Academy completes through education.